This video will detail early Spanish expeditions into the Rio de la Plata, focusing on the founding of Asunción by Juan de Salazar y Espinosa. We will examine the roles of key figures such as Domingo Martínez de Irala and Francisco Ruiz de Galán, their conflicts over governance, and the subsequent establishment of unique colonial policies concerning indigenous relations and mixed-race populations in the region. Don Pedro de Mendoza, prior to his departure for Europe, sent his relative Gonzalo de Mendoza from Spain to gather provisions and recruits. Gonzalo returned to Corpus Christi, accompanied by Juan de Salazar y Espinosa and Domingo Martínez de Irala. Upon their arrival at the fort, the trio embarked on an expedition to locate Juan de Ayolas, who had been designated as Don Pedro's successor. They entered the Rio de la Plata and sailed upstream along the Paraguay River until they reached Fort La Candelaria. There, Irala remained at the fort, while Gonzalo de Mendoza and Juan de Salazar y Espinosa split into separate exploring parties, searching in all directions for Ayolas. During his explorations, Juan de Salazar y Espinosa discovered an ideal location for a new settlement. On August 15, 1537, he founded Asunción at this site, naming it after the Catholic feast of the Assumption, which falls on that date. The land was already inhabited by the Guarani, an indigenous people who were non-belligerent and open to trade and communication with the Spaniards. After establishing Asunción, Salazar returned to Corpus Christi and subsequently to Buenos Aires, where a small Spanish force remained. Following numerous attacks from local indigenous groups, some of these men eventually joined Salazar and sailed to Asunción. After many months of waiting at Fort La Candelaria, Irala departed for Asunción. Upon his arrival, he discovered Francisco Ruiz de Galán, a childhood friend of Don Pedro de Mendoza, acting as governor. Don Pedro, before his departure for Europe, had entrusted Ruiz de Galán with the management of the Buenos Aires fort until Ayolas's return. A dispute arose between Irala and Ruiz de Galán because Irala had been nominated as governor by the Spanish crown in Ayolas's absence. Ruiz de Galán demanded that Irala acknowledge him as governor, and when Irala refused, he was imprisoned and subsequently sent back to La Candelaria. Upon reaching Fort La Candelaria, Irala found the Paraguay Indians in rebellion. He successfully subdued them and reasserted control of the fort. From this location, he continued to dispatch parties in search of Juan de Ayolas. Ruiz de Galán returned to Buenos Aires, stopping at Corpus Christi, where he inexplicably attacked the friendly and unsuspecting Timbu Indians, resulting in a massacre. The reason for this assault is unknown, especially given that the Timbu had consistently supplied the Spanish forts with provisions since their arrival. After appointing Gonzalo de Mendoza as the commandant of Buenos Aires, Galán returned to Asunción, perhaps hoping his victory against the non-combative Timbu tribe would earn him favor among the populace. However, upon his arrival in Asunción, Galán found Irala established as the new governor, having been elected by the people and supported by a clause in the royal letters patent that provided for such a scenario in the event of Ayolas's non-return. Shortly after Galán's departure from Buenos Aires, Mendoza led a hunting party and was ambushed by indigenous people, resulting in his death and the loss of half his troops. Irala's initial act as governor was to command the complete evacuation of Buenos Aires. An Italian vessel, originally bound for Peru with colonists, made a stop in the Rio de la Plata, where it collected the remaining troops from Buenos Aires and continued on to Asunción. Francisco Ruiz de Galán, recognizing his loss of power in the region and unable to remain in Buenos Aires, opted to return to Spain. He departed Buenos Aires and reached the island of Santa Catalina, intending to await a ship for his journey home. However, Ruiz de Galán vanished on that island and never returned to Spain. Domingo Martínez de Irala's governing strategy for the region focused on conciliation with the native populations rather than subjugation. His analysis of previous settlements in the area, such as Buenos Aires, clearly indicated that the primary threat to the Spanish presence came from indigenous rebellions, which the Crown could not effectively support due to the extreme distance and isolation of the settlement. From the outset, Irala actively encouraged his soldiers to marry native women, believing this would foster strong ties to the land. Two Franciscan priests initiated efforts to Christianize the indigenous population by learning their language, Guarani, which they also began to transcribe into writing. Domingo Martínez de Irala's policies rendered Paraguay distinct from other Spanish colonies. Not only were mixed-race marriages common, but the children born of Spanish fathers and native mothers were also recognized as Spaniards, possessing the same rights as colonists born in Spain. In summary, the early Spanish colonization of the Rio de la Plata, marked by the founding of Asunción by Juan de Salazar y Espinosa, was defined by both internal power struggles and complex interactions with indigenous peoples. The conflict between Domingo Martínez de Irala and Francisco Ruiz de Galán, alongside events like the Timbú massacre, underscored the turbulent nature of the era. Ultimately, Irala's pragmatic governance, which included encouraging intermarriage with native women and granting equal rights to mixed-race children, fostered a unique and more stable society in Paraguay, distinguishing it from other Spanish colonies.
Subscribe and embark on animated journeys through the Age of Discovery, where brave explorers, lost worlds, and untold stories await.